Mass psychosis. We are surrounded by stupidity. Courage is needed to get out of the idiot pandemic. The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. George Orwell. Imagine waking up one morning to find that almost everyone around you is acting irrationally, not just eccentric, but truly disconnected from logic, reason, or even self awareness. Now imagine realizing this wasn't just a dream, it's your daily reality. What if you're not the one who's insane? What if you're the only one still sane in a world gone mad? This is a dive into the uncomfortable and yet fascinating truth behind mass psychosis. How can entire societies fall into a hypnotic trance of stupidity, illusion, and blind obedience? Why does this happen? How do I recognize when this is happening? And most importantly, how do I escape its grip? Let's define a brutal truth. Human beings are typically not rational, despite access to science, history, philosophy, and countless tools for critical thinking. We behave like a flock of sheep chasing imaginary wolves. Throughout history, we've seen empires collapse, not from external enemies, but from collective delusions that eroded them from within. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes warned that the senses could deceive us, but he had no idea how much society as a whole could deceive itself. Today, psychologists refer to this as mass formation and psychosis, a phenomenon where large groups of people lose touch with reality, becoming absorbed by false narratives, emotional hysteria, or manipulative ideologies. But what triggers this collapse of reason? The brilliant psychiatrist Carl Jung described how the psyche, when cut off from meaning, purpose, or spiritual anchoring, becomes vulnerable to mass suggestions. In his view, when individuals are not grounded in their true identity, they seek it in the herd. And the herd, unfortunately, is mostly driven by fear, propaganda, and the need to belong, even at the cost of truth. Think about the last few years. Social media, news cycles, cultural wars. We've witnessed people repeating slogans they don't understand, supporting movements they've never researched, and attacking others simply for questioning the mainstream. Is this intelligence? Is this progress? Or is this a society in a state of mental and physical collapse? The French philosopher Gustave Le Bon, in his classic book The Crowd, explained that individuals in a group lose their sense of responsibility and critical thinking. Instead of acting like rational adults, they become emotionally charged children, easy to manipulate, quick to rage, and eager to conform. Here lies the danger. The more disconnected people become from critical thought, the easier it is to control them. Mass psychosis is not just a clinical term, it's a lived experience. It happens when people stop thinking for themselves and start outsourcing their perception of reality to authority figures, mass media, or popular trends. How many of the opinions you hear every day are truly someone's own? How many are just echoes of what they've been told to believe? This phenomenon intensifies when fear is introduced. Fear is the fuel of collective madness, and those in power use it to drive the herd in whatever direction suits them, from religious crusades to political regimes, from economic panics to health scares. Mass hysteria has repeatedly been manufactured and weaponized throughout history. But the most insidious part of all this, when you're surrounded by people who've surrendered to mass psychosis, they don't think they're crazy. They think you are. This reversal is chilling. Suddenly, questioning becomes dangerous. Curiosity becomes heresy. Silence becomes safer than truth. In this climate, true intelligence and true sanity becomes isolated. So what can we do? The first step is awareness. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If we don't recognize the forces acting on our minds, we will never escape them. Mass psychosis feeds on passivity, on silence, on blind conformity. It thrives when people stop asking why. Have you noticed how difficult it is to have deep, rational conversations in today's world? Why is dissent so often labeled as hate? Why do those who speak inconvenient truths face more resistance than those who peddle comfortable lies? Could it be that we are not dealing with ignorance, but with a willful escape from reality? This escape is seductive. It promises belonging, safety, and identity. But at what cost? Think back to a time when you disagreed with the majority. Not out of stubbornness, but because something inside you whispered, this doesn't feel right. This moment, although subtle, was a fracture, a glimpse into the mechanism that governs social conformity and silences inner truth. The human brain is not only designed for survival, but for belonging. Our ancestors needed the tribe. Exclusion means death. That primal programming still exists in us today. But now, instead of lions in the savannah, we fear being the odd one out. We fear ridicule, isolation, judgment. Mass psychosis takes full advantage of this primal fear. Ordinary people are afraid to stand alone. Now amplify that across billions of individuals. Multiply that by the reach of social media, the power of manipulated news, and the speed of modern communication. You now have a psychological virus, an epidemic of obedience, infecting minds at scale. But there's more. When people abandon their own thinking, they don't just become neutral, they often become aggressive. A society that suppresses truth doesn't become peaceful, it becomes hostile to truth tellers. This is why you'll notice a strange phenomenon. When someone calmly presents evidence, logic, or reason, the crowd reacts with rage, mockery, or censorship. Not because the information is wrong, but because it threatens the false safety of their illusion. It is not stupidity in the intellectual sense. Many people caught in mass delusion have degrees, titles, status. But intelligence without awareness is like a ship without a compass. You can be brilliant and still deeply lost. Here we reach the painful irony. We are surrounded not just by ignorance, but by educated confusion. Information is everywhere, but wisdom is scarce. People have facts but lack clarity. They know what to think but not how to think. They mistake consensus for truth and compliance for virtue. This is not entirely their fault. Modern society is designed to distract. Schools teach memorization, not critical thinking. Media sells emotion, not accuracy. Social media rewards outrage, not wisdom. We are trained to react, not to reflect. So, what is the antidote? It begins with reclaiming your mind. You must build an inner firewall, one that filters the noise, questions assumptions, and protects your inner clarity from being hijacked by the collective. Carl Jung believed that one of the most dangerous things in life is to follow the crowd while believing you are thinking for yourself. He urged us to confront the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we deny. In today's world, the collective shadow is growing darker. Projection, blame, hysteria are all signs of a society in psychological distress. The key is this: you are not powerless. You are not doomed to drown in the sea of madness. Your awareness is the very lifeboat others are seeking, even if they don't know it yet. As you awaken from the mass illusion, you'll notice things others miss: the subtle manipulation in headlines, the emotionally loaded language designed to provoke, not inform, the normalization of double standards, the silence around inconvenient truths, and you'll also notice something else: the deep loneliness that comes from seeing clearly in a blind world. This loneliness is not a curse, it's a rite of passage. Every awakened thinker has walked this path, from Socrates to Galileo, from Jung to Orwell. Those who see beyond the illusion often walk alone. But here's the secret: they're never truly alone. In every era, there are others, quiet, questioning, watching, waiting for the moment to speak, to resist, to rebuild. That moment is now, because the cost of staying silent is growing. The longer mass psychosis is allowed to spread, the more reality is distorted, and the harder it becomes to reclaim sanity. Children grow up without critical thinking. Truth becomes relative, and society becomes a stage play where no one remembers the script, only the roles they've been assigned. The following are the psychological stages of mass psychosis: how it starts, how it evolves, and how it ends. We must first understand the individual psyche, because a society is nothing more than a collection of minds reacting to fear, desire, and meaning. When a culture begins to unravel, when people lose trust in leaders, institutions, or even in each other, they become vulnerable. Anxiety rises, certainty fades. The old stories no longer make sense, and nothing has come to replace them. This is the fertile ground in which mass psychosis begins to grow. It starts with disorientation, a vague sense that something is wrong, but no clarity about what it is. The world feels chaotic. People feel helpless. In this fog, the mind begins to crave order, even if it comes at the cost of truth. The next stage is simplification. A narrative appears, often from the media, the state, or charismatic influences. It offers a clear villain, a clear solution, and a strong emotional charge. It tells you who to blame, what to fear, and what to do. Complexity is erased. Nuance disappears. Everything becomes black or white, good or evil, us versus them. At this point, many people surrender their critical thinking, not out of stupidity, but out of exhaustion. To question everything is tiring. To follow the herd feels safe. Then comes the stage of conformity. The new belief system spreads, not because everyone believes it, but because everyone thinks everyone else believes it. And so, out of fear, they stay silent. And silence becomes complicity. This is what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance. The majority may secretly disagree with the dominant narrative, but since no one dares to speak up, it appears as if everyone agrees. Dissent disappears, not because it is gone, but because it's hidden. The fourth stage is aggression. Once the new reality is accepted, those who still resist it are seen as threats. The crowd begins to enforce the new norms, not just socially but emotionally and physically. Censorship increases. Debate dies. The questioner becomes the enemy. This is why every totalitarian regime in history, no matter how irrational, has millions of supporters who believed they were fighting for truth and justice. The people were not evil. They were trapped in a system that rewarded obedience and punished thought. Here's where it gets interesting. Mass psychosis doesn't last forever. Eventually, the weight of reality breaks through. Lies collapse under their own contradictions. People begin to feel the tension between what they are told and what they experience. The illusion cracks. That's when the fifth and final stage begins, awakening. At first, it's subtle. A quiet voice inside begins to ask, is this really true? As more people begin to question, the collective spell starts to break. This awakening can be slow or sudden, and it is often painful. Why painful? Because waking up means realizing that much of what you believed, trusted, or even defended was false. It means seeing how you were manipulated. It means admitting how easily the mind can be hijacked. This cognitive dissonance, the gap between illusion and truth, can shake people to their core. And yet, it is only through this shaking that clarity is born. Those who will survive are not necessarily the strongest. They are the ones who can maintain a sense of inner purpose. They must have meaning, something real within that the external madness cannot destroy. This is the key to escaping mass psychosis. You must anchor your mind to something deeper than public opinion. That may be a personal philosophy, a spiritual discipline, a dedication to truth, even when it hurts. It must be something so rooted in your core that no slogan, trend, or narrative can override it. But this requires courage. Because to see clearly in a world gone blind is not a comfortable experience. It is at times heartbreaking. You may lose friends. You may be ridiculed. You may feel alone. But ask yourself, would you rather be comforted by lies or awakened by truth? There's a reason many ancient traditions spoke of illumination or enlightenment, not as blissful, but as disruptive. The light doesn't always feel good, especially when it reveals the shadows you didn't want to see. But once you see, you can't unsee. And that's the beginning of true freedom. So, how to stay mentally sovereign in a time of mass hypnosis? The first step is silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of inner observation. Learn to watch your thoughts. Where did they come from? Are they grounded in evidence? Do they serve truth or comfort? This practice, rooted in Stoicism and Buddhism alike, is the gateway to psychological autonomy. Second, reduce emotional reactivity. Mass psychosis thrives on triggered minds. The more reactive you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Begin to question your immediate reactions. Emotional discipline is not suppression, it's sovereignty. Third, reconnect with meaning, whether through philosophy, spirituality, art, or nature. Find what transcends the chaos. Fourth, build community with people who value truth more than comfort. One awakened mind is powerful, but many awakened minds, connected by truth, can change the course of history. Finally, prepare yourself for the last revelation. The greatest escape from mass psychosis does not lie in resisting the crowd, but in transcending the need for a crowd altogether. There's a moment in every seeker's life when the noise of the world fades and a new silence arises. It is not the silence of ignorance or avoidance, but the silence of realization. A clarity so piercing that for a brief moment everything makes sense. You see through the illusion. You recognize the madness. And most importantly, you recognize yourself. This is the final escape of mass psychosis, to transcend the need for approval, applause, and belonging. Because the deepest root of mass delusion is not fear of truth, it is fear of being alone with truth. When people fear isolation more than they fear falsehood, they choose lies. But when you learn to stand in your own presence, when your sense of self is no longer tied to the shifting winds of social consensus, you become free. True freedom is not rebellion. It is not simply rejecting the herd. It is the profound capacity to walk alone, in clarity, without hatred, without despair, simply because truth has become your home. Truth begins in the individual, in the soul that dares to know itself without mirrors. When your identity depends on reflection, you are at the mercy of distortion. But when it is rooted in direct awareness, it becomes immovable. This is what terrifies those who dwell in mass psychosis. You cannot control an individual who no longer fears rejection. You cannot silence a mind that has found its voice. Every system of mass control, whether political, ideological, or psychological, operates on one simple principle: divide the self. Disconnect the person from their inner compass. Once they doubt themselves, they become susceptible to outside direction. But here's the secret: your inner compass was never broken. It was buried. Buried under shame, guilt, fear, ridicule, noise. And yet, it remains. It always has. To escape mass psychosis, then, is not to become something new. It is to remember what you are. This is why awakening is so painful. It is not a discovery. It is a recovery, a return. A return requires grieving for the years lost in illusion, the connections built on falsehood, the truth we denied to survive. But grief is not the end. It is the doorway to strength. Because once you remember, truly remember, who you are beneath the programming, a profound shift happens. You stop reacting. You start observing. You stop chasing approval. You start seeking alignment. You stop feeling others' madness. You start mastering your own mind. And from this space, you begin to radiate a new kind of energy, one that cannot be explained by credentials, social status, or charisma. It is the energy of coherence, of integrity, of truth embodied. Others will feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be threatened by it. But it doesn't matter, because your peace no longer depends on their perception. This is the ultimate escape, not fleeing from the world, but no longer needing it to validate you. It is from this place, not from rage, not from resistance, but from clarity that real transformation begins. You become the antidote to mass psychosis, not by preaching, not by arguing, but by living as proof that another way is possible. When others see that you are not afraid to question, not afraid to be wrong, not afraid to stand apart, they begin to remember something in themselves, something ancient, something sacred. This is how awakening spreads, not by force, but by resonance. This is what mass psychosis fears most: the awakening individual. Because one individual, truly awakening, deeply rooted, immune to fear, has more power than 10,000 confused minds. Your mind is now liberated. Your soul is now liberated, and she comes forward. The world does not need unconscious followers. It needs conscious leaders. I chose to be one of them. Will you join us in the revolution of consciousness? Remember who you are. Remember why you are here. Remember, remember, remember. From millennium slavery to individual sovereignty. Let's rejoice, because the insanity we are experiencing is an illusion, which is pushing more and more of us to awaken. Our world is in an evolutionary crisis, because the human mind is ready to go beyond rational intelligence to a greater consciousness. In the Orient, in the 20th century, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother discovered and anchored truth consciousness, the supramental consciousness in the earthly atmosphere. Since then, the supramental consciousness has been operational on Earth as an active evolutionary power. Once well anchored, the new consciousness was ready to move on to the next stage, its popularization and propagation. In the West, in the 21st century, emerged personal creation. Sri Aurobindo synthesized the Eastern and Western ideas of evolution and boldly declared that humans are transitional beings. They're not final. Evolution continues, and humans will be surpassed. This is the future awaiting humanity. This is an unprecedented adventure of consciousness on Earth. One single and sincere look at the present world situation is enough to convince us that it has reached the point of no return. Let's stop repeating our obsolete ways, which can only bring more suffering. Let us all spread the contagion of infinite love. In these times of irremediable dissolution of the illusion, let us keep our faith ardent with an unfailing sincerity. We must choose our soul at all costs. Infinite love.